Do you want to be a successful property investor? Or do you want to be a more successful property investor? Well, then you're going to have to do things differently to what most investors do. And one way to do that is to treat your property investing as a business. Now, you've probably heard me say that before, but today I'm going to be discussing this concept in detail with Australia's leading property tax accountant, Ken Race, Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, and I'm sure you're going to find his take on things a little bit different, but you're going to get some great insights to help keep you moving in your property investing, to help you move up a level. And if you're already a successful property investor, I know Ken will offer you a few tweaks you probably haven't even thought of. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now, here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Most property investors start their journey with the best intentions. They've got great enthusiasm, but unfortunately, 92% don't manage to get past the stage of ever owning one or two investment properties. And the sad thing is, these investors, they never really set themselves up for financial independence. In fact, less than 1% of investors build a portfolio of 6 or more properties. So where did they go wrong? Now, sure, some have bought the wrong properties, often being sidetracked by property marketers or spruikers. But in most cases, the root of their problem is they haven't got a strategy. They've either got the wrong strategy or lack one. It never fails to amaze me how many people go into property investing without any sort of strategy, let alone one that's specifically crafted to match their personal needs, their goals, their timelines, their budgets, their risk profile. It's like starting a new business without a business plan. You haven't got any idea what you're going to sell, how you're going to sell, where you're going to do it. And if you think about it, property investing is like a business. It's a business decision. It is a business decision. You wouldn't take starting a business lightly, so why would you start investing without a clear, structured plan? Otherwise, you'd be ruled by your emotions, or you keep getting sidetracked by the media hype. So how do you treat your properties like a business? That's what I wanted to ask Ken Race today. He's Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, and Ken is widely recognised as Australia's leading property and wealth tax strategist. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, we speak about this a lot, and I know you speak to your clients about it. And I guess maybe before we go any further, because you're an accountant and you're a financial planner, we really should give a quick disclaimer that we give at the end of every show anyway. This isn't personal advice, but this is really the sort of information people need to know and understand, and then seek their own advice to suit their circumstances. Is that a fair way of starting?
Yes, I think we've got to talk general. There's lots of opportunities for people to come and get specific advice, but these podcasts, we've got to operate them as general.
Sure. So, Ken, I've often heard you refer to property as a business. People have read that in your blogs and in our podcasts. What do you mean by that?
I believe this is one of the fundamental cornerstones of creating wealth through property. You have to treat it as a business.
You also got to think like a business person, though, don't you?
Absolutely. And that's probably the first part of the jigsaw puzzle. You got to think that way and actually have a mindset of a business owner. All too often, people are led, I think, into a false sense of security that any residential property in Australia will grow in value.
They got lulled into that last year, though, didn't they, Ken? Because they were almost right. But the fact that your property went up 10% when others went up 20 or 30%, you still could have bought an underperforming property and fooled yourself.
That's it. And I've seen some recent new clients where, they've come and seen me and their property has grown by 15% and they're really happy with it. But when I've looked, what did it grow in the previous 15 years? It's been stagnant. So it's like that once in a 30-year spike. So it's a very dangerous position to take, that you think all properties will grow. And in fact, I've heard you say, Michael, which I also believe, that less than 5% of properties are what you would call investment grade. So many fall in value.
Sure. So it's not just capital growth, though. They actually produce wealth-producing rates of return, and they're less volatile, and they're going to help you achieve your goals, aren't they?
Spot on. So, we certainly don't want properties to fall in value, but we also don't want them to stagnate or have minor growth. I think the other side of the consideration, it's got to be a business, but another consideration is the money you're using to purchase this property is either coming from savings or borrowings. And in today's market, you need hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a property, even if it's one of the most less desirable investment properties, you're up for many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So surely if you're spending that much money, you need to have a plan. You need a feasibility review, an understanding of the economic and market dynamics, a perspective to identify the gems, and an ability to negotiate professionally.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kim, but I think that was really profound. So if you don't mind, I'm going to repeat that because you talked about a plan, and people know that we always start with our clients by putting a strategic property plan together. And in the wealth advisory space, you similarly put a plan together about their ownership structures and their estate planning and the long-term goals. But it's actually much more than that. To be a successful investor, look, everyone thinks they know a bit about property because they've lived in one, they've rented one. As we've often said, there's 25 million property experts in Australia. But I like what you said. You need to understand the big picture, the economics and the market dynamics. You need to have perspective. And you and I have been around long enough and had enough cycles under our belt and made enough mistakes, as have our team at Metropole, to actually be able to do that. And then the next thing is you said to negotiate professionally. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, these guys have got a vested interest because that's what their team does. Yes, we have a vested interest, but I think it's in getting our clients a good result, Ken.
That's right, because, if you're trying to buy, there's got to be a seller in most cases. So these sellers, they go through real estate
in every
agents.
case, Ken, I think.
Yes. I have seen a few for sale signs in someone's front yard, sort of hand painted. But these agents, they're trained and they're practiced and they perform these functions daily. So how can most of us who buy one or a handful of properties, compete with people? It's not a level playing field. And what I believe is we need to tip the scales back in your favour. And that's why sometimes getting professional advice helps.
Well, not sometimes. In fact, Ken, I often say that it levels the playing field, but having the right team around you, having the right plans, knowing what you're looking for, actually it does more than level the playing field. It tips the odds in your favour, because if you're doing it with a business plan while the other side is selling on emotion, you're actually on top.
That's right. It is exactly that. You've got to outperform. So buying the right property at the right price, and it's not always at a bargain. You just have to know what that right price is. That's what gives you the best chance to maximize that future capital growth, which is what you need to help improve your rental yields. It gives you equity to use for future purposes, obviously subject to finance. And good capital appreciation gives you an exit strategy. So in the event of a sale, either planned or unplanned, you actually maximize those capital gains.
Ken, if I could again interrupt you, I think many people don't realise that at the end, what they have is mainly going to be their tax-free capital gain. It's not going to be the rent they've received because they paid tax on it and it's gone on outgoings. It's not the money they've saved because they've saved some, but it's really going to be the equity that has grown in a tax-free environment. It's much easier to do that than to save after paying tax or pay get rent, even if you get depreciation allowances.
That's right, and it's really that equity growth that really is, the hidden part behind, if I can call it, the compound growth, because people say, well, what's the difference between a 4% growth and a 5% growth, but that's nearly 200 grand, 130 odd thousand after 10 years. That's almost the deposit on a property, let alone if you buy something above an average return, a 7% return versus, call it a 3% return, which a lot of people get, that's about $500,000 extra.
It's also going to give extra rent, Ken, isn't it? Because if it's an area where values are going up, in general, maybe not at the same time, the rents go up as well. So there's lots of reasons to actually outperform.
Correct. And, I think of one of the first properties I bought, my current rent is more than the purchase price. The percentage is about the same, but it's now on a figure 25 times more. While, the rent might be, call it 3%, it's now on 900,000 as opposed to 31,000, which was the purchase price.
I never thought of it that way, because my first property cost me $18,000 and I only paid half of it. And yeah, my rent's even more than that now. I like that, Ken.
Yeah. So that's what you've got to build to create, if you like, what you're trying to do in the future. So as a business, you need to consider the future and current use of your money in the property, how it's going to be funded. I think a critical thing, and it's something I really instilled in my children, the ability to grow your own equity. That's the renovations, et cetera, as opposed to just waiting for the market to grow. As a business, you've also got to consider the buying structure. Whose name do I put it in? Is it joint names? Is it single names? Is it a trust?
How much does that matter, Ken?
Hugely, because at the end of the day, it'll impact your capital gains tax. It'll impact your land tax. It could impact the annual income tax level. It could impact future borrowing capacity. So
stamp duty too in some states.
Correct. Although to a lower degree, but land tax is a big one as well. So that's a big thing. And at the end of the day, why are we creating this wealth? It's certainly not to open up a bank balance and have a look at it. It's to improve your and your family's lifestyle. It's that intergenerational wealth transfer, from, parents to children to grandkids. I've sort of told my kids that I'm going to skip them now that they've given me grandchildren. But you've got to help them along the way. So if you want to achieve all that, you need a much more holistic approach to investing, where you take into account components of tax, structuring, asset protection, estate planning, risk, retirement. All those things have to come under a central umbrella, someone who can help you. And I think all too often the advice of one profession, even if it's right, it's limited to a specific question and therefore not necessarily correct or the best solution overall. And look,
I want to take, Ken, I want to take up on a couple of those things. So the first thing is that people are thinking, well, that's too far down the track. I'm young. I haven't even had my kids. How important is it to start off in the right ownership structure?
Hugely important, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Property for most people is a long-term investment. So lots of things can happen. You change your job, you end up with occupational health and safety, responsibilities. Your children go into litigious professions, doctors, that sort of stuff. So you've got to think long term, because the asset you're buying, the property you're buying, is for most people a long-term asset. It's not a speculative investment, shares that I might buy and sell. You can't sell half a house, you sell the whole house. So you've got to take all that into consideration day one, because if you need to change your mind in 10 or 15 years, the cost is huge with capital gains tax, with stamp duty. And if it's your home, you potentially could lose the main residence exemption and the land tax exemption.
So getting the right ownership structures right up front. And by the way, that's not the sort of advice you'd get from the typical buyer's agent. And no disrespect, but basically that's not their area of expertise. And that's the other thing I'd like to just quickly take up with you, because you said a moment ago, you need a team of people. So you need a buyer's agent, you need a strategist, you need an accountant, you need a solicitor, maybe a financial planner. But Ken, how do you join the dots? How do you get it all to work together?
Yeah, look, I've thought long and hard about this. And there's a lot of smart people out there. It's not as easy as joining the dots because a lot of people can't see the dots. You've got to bridge those chasms between, the professional and you. So you need to build those bridges, and that's what's critical because accountants do their bit, lawyers do their bit, financial planners do their bit, and nobody brings it all together because they're speaking from one point of view. And
but the way they're speaking different languages half the time,
correct.
too.
So you need someone who actually speaks their lingo, their language, to actually work for you. And look, as a personal thing, I think it's unfair that, can I say, ordinary Australians, middle-class Australians, whatever the definition is, do not have access to the level of professional advice that the rich have. That's why the rich get richer. They build a team around them to help them achieve their goals and responsibilities, but they first work out what are their goals.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the rich people have their own consultants, and I know people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and people like that have their own what's called a family office, where in-house they have their accountants, their solicitors, their advisors working on their affairs. But I know that you have seen a gap in this in Australia, and you've tried to fill that gap.
That's right. So, we want to fill that gap for these people by bringing together those various aspects to guide you through the maze. And it's really this strategy of wealth creation and retention, that's really what people want. So they typically, want to get more money, but not for money's sake. You need your health, you need family, spirituality. So you need to, if we can talk about money, as you always say, Michael, you need to sort of say, when I'm talking about wealth creation, I've got to do it in the best and highest use of my time and money.
Let's do a shameless plug, Ken. Basically, your team do that. So you had a team at Metropole Wealth Advisory, and you have accounting degrees, financial planning, also real estate license. But you've done it yourself, run national businesses, worked in international businesses. So you're happy to be the central point. And we do use outside consultants all the time at Metropole Wealth Advisory. So we're not pretending we can do it all.
That's right. And the trick, if I can call it that, it's not a trick like smokes and mirrors, is to understand them, work with a few of them, where you can actually create new products and services, understand the latest rulings, where we can then pass them on to our clients. So a lot of the professionals I work with, we meet weekly, monthly, fortnightly, and go through, typical scenarios. So we're actually at the forefront of what that profession is doing, and therefore we can bring to that clients that exposure at a greatly reduced price.
That's great. So if you're interested in having Ken on your side, go to metropole.com.au and find out about our wealth advisory services and see if you can have why not have Australia's leading property and wealth tax advisor on your side. But Ken, I think one of the other interesting things is that these things keep changing. The laws keep changing, regulations keep changing, trust requirements, company requirements this month in March are changing as well. So how does one keep up to date with all that?
You as the investor, can I say it's impossible? I think we've got to call a spade a spade. It's you do what you do well, and then you have to trust and engage people that keep on top of that. So really the way I do it is through a lot of reading.
Well, you've still got to do your continual professional development. I know you put hours into that.
That's it. And as I said, I meet with some of our professional referral partners where we go through client potential requirements, come up with solutions, come up with possible problems, and then come up with a solution before a client comes to us. And you couldn't do that if, you went off the street to see a lawyer, because they'd be charging you their hundreds, if not thousands of dollars an hour. Whereas with us, we work with limited numbers of people, and the quid pro quo back to us is they give us their time for us to upgrade and keep our knowledge at a reasonable level so that we can actually understand an issue, see a problem, and see the direction a solution should take to then take it to that profession to implement.
Now, once you've built a property investment business, or I guess any other sort of business, you've got to get the right team around you. You also need to know the right questions to ask. That's something you've taught me over the years, because if you don't ask your consultants the right questions, sometimes they won't be forthcoming. And one of them tends to be about asset protection. I know a lot of people come to you and they want to know, well, how do I stop predators, or if my daughter divorces, the outlaws or the tax man or other people get at my assets. I've worked really hard at it. I don't want to lose them.
That's right. So we've got to look at asset protection, not in a crazy way, because, we're not all surgeons, but litigation can come via a profession, obviously if you're a surgeon. But I get a lot of clients who come to me in their early 40s. They've bought their home, they might have an investment property, and because of where they bought their first home, it's actually grown in value quite considerably over 15 odd years, 20 years. I had a client yesterday, they bought what they had as a modest home sort of 25 years ago for, what was it from memory, 680,000 in a leafy Melbourne suburb. It's now worth over $4 million. So
there's a lesson there on its own, isn't there?
Correct. They fell over that. So, but all of a sudden, they're a manager in a manufacturing environment. They've got now people underneath them on a production floor, and they are predominantly the sole person responsible for occupational health and safety. So that means if something goes wrong, someone gets hurt, it goes to them. Now, they didn't know that when they finished uni. They didn't know that when they were going through the first levels of promotion, but all of a sudden they find themselves in this area. And, you sort of say to yourself, well, if I moved everything into a trust, I have to pay tax, I have to pay stamp duty, I lose my main residence exemption. So there's got to be a better way. And we obviously have all our insurances and we try and do the right thing, but sometimes even that's not enough. So what we need is a different question to ask. If we go back to what we were saying before, we're not trying to protect, call it that property, those bricks and mortar. We're trying to protect the money, the equity in it. And therefore, our strategies help protect the equity without triggering the taxes. And it even encompasses the family home. People might have shares or cash. I always say we'll even take into account the Picasso painting. But I've had a client just over the last week or so, quite valuable vintage cars. So most cars go up in value. He's got vintage cars that are actually appreciating, probably better than shares and property if you take the leverage component out. So how do you protect those assets? So whatever that asset is. So we want to protect that equity without triggering the taxes. And we've certainly got a number of different strategies depending on what you've got and where they are. A couple of months ago, I had a client and he said, how do I protect my wine collection? I got a bit of a wine collection. Michael, as you know, I have a few wines.
You have just a few.
Just
Ken.
a few. But, when he told me his cellar, it was many, many thousands. And the average cost of each of his bottles was certainly well into the hundreds. So he had a very large portfolio that in the case of litigation, that could be taken off him and auctioned. There's a wide variety of things you've got to look at depending on your specific circumstances. And then the second area you've got to look at is, well, okay, when I pass away and it gets handed down to the next generation, how do we protect that to stay in the family that, my children that I wanted it to go to? And again, there's asset protection, but a big one, that a lot of people say is, I want to protect it so it stays with my child, not the person they marry or they might end up with in case of a divorce. So you can actually put in place strategies and documentation that if you give it to your son or daughter and they get divorced, the divorced spouse doesn't get any of that.
I know that story very well, having had two of my kids in my family, extended family, divorced. But Ken, a lot of people are told, okay, that's okay, you got your own name. Just put it in a trust and it'll be protected. And I know there are courses out there selling that concept on the internet. Is it really as simple as that?
Well, no, because if you own assets in your personal name, then if you're individually sued, then they can't get the assets in a trust. But if you've got assets in a trust, it's like the Greek story, the Trojan horse, where once they get into the gates, then they can attack from within. So as an example with a property, if that property is in a trust and there's an investor and they sue, then they've got access to the trust.
Or not
assets.
an investor, a tenant or things like that.
Yeah. My apologies.
But actually, even to put them in a trust, it triggers capital gains tax.
If you go from outside to in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as that. But we've said it before, but let's be quite clear. Trust really just a document, a piece of paper, and with lots of clauses in it. They're not all the same, are they?
Not all the same. And a trust law is state-based law that the federal government through the ATO try and interpret. And, I had a client just in the last month. Both spouses were in high litigious professions and they wanted to buy, can I say, extremely expensive home. And their accountant said, well, you have to put it in a trust. And, that's half right. But the problem is they lose the main residence exemption. Whereas the client came,
in other words, just to make it clear, if you sell your own home in due course to upgrade, downgrade, move interstate, you don't pay capital gains tax. But if you move it into a trust, you lose that capital gains tax exemption, and that can come to a lot of money.
A lot of money. So that client read something that we published, a podcast, and he came and I said, well, look, you can have the property in the trust for asset protection, but there are strategies you can put in place where you can retain that main residence exemption. So therefore, the capital gains, if that property is ever sold, would be tax-free. So there are different strategies, and the difference is, does the local accountant have sufficient knowledge and expertise and access to that level of knowledge that they can give? So the traditional answer is you lose the main residence exemption. So what I say to a lot of my clients is, the local accountant or the local lawyer is, call it the GP in a medical sense, and they send you off to the specialist to get that specialist advice, which is what we do at Metropole Wealth Advisory.
And then often their accountant or solicitor implements the strategy, the plan you've
Correct. Under our guidance. So if they don't know what to do or how to do it, we tell them how to do it and what to do. So it gets done correctly. It's executed correctly.
So I guess in summary, if you can, buy your assets in the correct structure up front. And with that, you've got to begin with the end in mind and think about what's going on. So is it worth spending money up front, getting advice and setting up the right structures when already the budget's tight? In my mind, the answer is yes, it is, because it's a long-term investment, just like spending a bit extra and buying in the right locations, the right investment. So you don't want to get the cheapest advice. Ken, I think the most expensive advice actually is the cheap advice you get for free on the internet, the wrong advice you get for free on the internet. So I think for many people, it's the right structure answer up front. And if not, if you're going along the way, if your circumstances have changed, then it's still not too late to get advice, because there are some options to protect your assets without necessarily triggering capital gains tax or stamp duty implications. Is that a fair way of summarising what you've just said?
It certainly is. And look, if I can just add another 30 seconds, the other big one I see is people in business. they're set up in the wrong structure. And it costs them untold additional funds in income tax every year, the potential to lose their capital gains tax if they ever sold the business, those tax benefits. It doesn't give them the right platform to invest in the future in the most efficient and effective manner. So it's businesses and individual, they've got to consider structures as a critical part to the investment decision.
Now, what I like about the advice you give to our clients is that it's not a cookie cutter approach. So I know that over the years we've suggested in the past that trusts are the right structures. But over the last year or two, I've noticed that for certain people in certain situations with certain types of income, owning properties in a company name, even though that's got its other downsides with capital gains tax, actually works much better and helps you build your equity faster.
Correct. And people are sort of shocked when they see the numbers. You know, for a few people that works.
So it's not for everybody, but if you are in the right
few people,
field, boy, does it make a difference.
And, you know, I give the example is if you're going to give X dollars to the ATO, wouldn't it be better to keep that as your deposit? So it's the same amount of money you're using, except one's going to a deposit for a property or another investment versus the ATO. So it's quite a substantial amount of money that's available for the right person in the right circumstances.
Now, in these podcasts, we do like giving people advice. We do want to help them. We want to give them some clarity in these confusing times. But some are going to have listened to you and me for the last half an hour and said, I don't get it. I'm not sure which of those things I should do. That was not our aim, because it would be very wrong to tell you which the right thing would be for you, because we don't even know you. But thank you for listening to Ken and me. But if you want to know what would be right or what wouldn't, or would Ken's advice even be able to help you, I know that you do offer the opportunity to have a free non-obligation chat with one of your team, or even you personally, Ken, to be able to see, is there an opportunity? Do you have options? Because, look, let's be blunt, you are very busy and you don't want to help people who haven't got options. And some people don't. But, boy, there are more options out there than you know. So there's stuff you know, there's stuff you know you don't know, but there's a whole lot of stuff that people don't even know they don't know about these areas, Ken.
That's absolutely right. You know, I spoke to somebody, you know, just in a time frame this morning, who came for one little piece of advice. That's all I want to know. Can you help me? But after a 20-minute conversation, we actually identified, you know, 4 things that were actually just as critical that he hadn't thought of. That's what the benefit of having that initial conversation, to actually bring those issues to the forefront, to see how we can help you and what's the best service that will give you the value.
Sure. So what your team and you do is build a strategic wealth plan. By the way, that's different to this property plan that the property strategists do, but go hand in glove. Not everybody needs a strategic wealth plan. But if you have options, and if you are thinking in the long term, and if you seriously do want to treat your property like a business, so therefore, go at the beginning, become one of those 1% who actually build intergenerational wealth out of their properties, go to metropole.com.au. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Find out about Ken's services at Metropole Wealth Advisory and have a chat with Ken. Ken, thanks for this. Now, this is going to actually lead to people asking more questions than it will have answered. And I know there's a whole lot of questions that people regularly leave on property updates. So I want to catch up with you again real soon in a future podcast. And let's have a talk about the common tax and asset protection questions that people have got.
Yeah, great idea. I'd love to do that.
Speak soon. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset message, I'd like to share a lesson I learned from watching a movie. A couple of weeks ago, I watched an old American sporting movie, a baseball movie. It was called A League of Their Own. And in one memorable scene. One of the team players, Dottie Hinson, tries to quit the team, telling her manager, who happened to be Tom Hanks, in the movie he played Jim Duggan, she said to him, "It's just too hard." Duggan replies, "It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would be doing it. The hard is what makes it great." Now that made me think, this is exactly the same thing with life, with your property investments, with your business. Don't let anyone tell you that being a successful property investor isn't hard. It is. Don't let anyone tell you that building a profitable business isn't hard. It is. Don't let anyone tell you developing financial freedom isn't hard, because it is. But on the other side of that challenge, on the other side of that difficulty, that's where the reward lives. And those that battle through the challenges get to reap the rewards. What kind of rewards? Well, look, there's too many to mention, but a few ones could be more choices in life, the ability to go to work because you want to, not because you have to, and of course the financial rewards that come with success, whatever that means for you. Whether it's knowing that you don't have to worry about money for your family, or the ability to make a significant contribution to charities of your choice, or even if it's just to buy yourself a nice present, a reward. All those rewards, though, aren't given. They're earned. And it is hard, but it's worth it. So the next time you want to quit when facing your first, your second, your 100th, your 50th, and 1,000th challenge, just remember what that rascal in the movie Jimmy Duggan said. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would be doing it. The hard is what makes it great. So now go out there and be great, and don't worry about stumbling along the way. Well, I hope you got some benefit from my chat with Ken Race today. And if you did, and if you got some insights about running your property investments like a business or ownership structures, please tell somebody else about the Michael Yardney podcast as well. Help me in my quest to make as many people as financially literate as possible. Of course, you can tell the world about it by leaving a review, as Chris Bainsey did. He left a 5-star review. Thank you very much. He said, "I'm getting into the property industry and have eagerly been consuming your podcast. Thanks for the great content and the variety of guests you have on." Now, Chris, if you send me an email, michael@metropole.com.au, I'd like to thank you for leaving that review. I'll give you one of my books. So if you leave a review and I read yours out, we'll do the same. I'll be back again real soon, but you can catch me in between these shows on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney, or why not join my private Facebook group, join a couple of other 1,000 people who daily get a snippet of something special from me I don't leave elsewhere. Just go to Facebook and look for the Property Update private Facebook group. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?